In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how I made this bodysuit with an open back and a high collar. I decided to not do a pattern for this. Instead, I will be draping and working straight from my mannequin. I began by pinning the fabric in place and kinda get an idea of what I wanted to do as I went along. Then I marked everything that I needed for my design, but only on one side. I started with my neckline and center front, and then I marked 2 inches away from the center front, which is where I'll be connecting my armhole. My next marks were the side seam and the armhole. Do not make the mistake of doing the armhole too close to the nipple area. For any design, make sure it covers a good 3 to 4 inches from the nipple, especially for bigger breasts. I also marked the waistline and the leg hole. Since I only work with 1/2, I need to fold the fabric along my center front marks. I like to pin the fabric together so that it doesn't move when I'm working on it. Then I just clean the lines with my curved roller. I only added 1/4 seam allowance to the side seams and the neckline because I will be binding the rest. Then cut it out, and when you unfold it, you will have the front piece ready. I decided to do a lining with the same fabric, so I just pinned the front piece onto the fabric and cut out another one exactly the same. Once the front piece is ready, it's time to drape the back piece. So I placed my fabric accordingly and began transferring my guidelines. Same as before, I'll need the side seam, center back, leg hole, and of course how low I want my back to be for this. For the back, I only need a single piece. Once I have my pieces all cut out, I will put the side seams together, making sure to align the waistline marks. Pin them and sew them down using a straight stitch. Instead of overlocking the edges, I will just do another straight stitch about 1/8 away from the first stitch line, so as close as possible. And then I will cut off the excess fabric. Do this on both side seams. Once I have my front and back pieces sewn together, then I will bind the raw edges. For this, I cut out a strip of the same fabric that is 2 inches wide and long enough to cover the whole edge. I will also use 2 strips of elastic that are each 14 inches long. I marked 2 inches away from center back on each side, and so the elastic will be attached starting from the neckline to this mark. I used a zigzag stitch to attach the elastic and the binding at the same time. You need to have the bodysuit and the binding right sides together and put the elastic on top. Begin by attaching the elastic at the starting point and ending point. That way, when you sew it all down, you pull on it as necessary and don't end up with extra material. Once we are done with that, we'll press it down with the iron so that it's nice and flat and easier to work with. Then we will fold a strip of fabric over the raw edge and press it, and then do another fold so that it covers the stitch line. Make sure to go a good amount past the stitch line so that when you sew on the other side of it, you're catching the folded fabric as you sew. Pin it down and begin sewing in the groove formed by the first seam. That way the second seam will be somewhat hidden. Now to make the collar, I cut out 2 rectangles out of the same fabric that are 17 inches long and 3 inches wide. This includes seam allowance and an extra inch for the hooks. To stiffen up the collar, I'm using a heavyweight iron-on interfacing. This will also keep it from stretching. Then, cut off the excess and mark the center front of the collars by folding them in half. Also, fold the neckline in half and mark the center front, so that you can align all the patterns at this mark. You will pin them together by sandwiching the bodysuit between the collars, right sides together, and sewing 3 of the edges first. Don't forget to cut off the corners, close to the stitch line so there's no bulking. Once you turn it over, you can then do an edge stitch, but starting and ending about 3/4 from the top. When that's done, it's time to hand stitch the hooks and eyes in place. The reason we left the top open was so that we could attach them to only one layer of the collar, leaving the visible layer clean without any of those stitches showing. To finish the collar, fold in the raw edges, pin it in place, and continue edge stitching the rest. For the bottom of the bodysuit, I pinned the front and back together where they met after trying it on. This is where I'll be putting the snaps. Also, notice that I didn't bind this part because I didn't want it to be bulky in case I wore it with a tight skirt or pants. I just did a straight stitch to keep the 2 front pieces together. I need to add interfacing to the part where the snaps are gonna go. So I measured 1 inch in between the snaps and added 1.5 more to fold the fabric so that it covers the interfacing. Then I made my little patterns on the interfacing to cut out and iron them on. Now fold the 1/2 inch in and fold again at the 1 inch mark. Hand stitch the front snaps in place, so the hand stitching stays hidden in the first layer like we did with the collar. Then sew the fold down with a straight stitch. For the back snaps, it doesn't really matter the order because the stitching will be on the inside anyways. And that's it! Our bodysuit is ready.